Hello, innovators. I'm Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator. Today I'm talking with Karen Swyszcz, the founder of Makin the Bacon blog, a fitness instructor like myself, and a host, Bacon, Bits, and Bytes podcast. Thank you for joining me on the Polymath Polycast, the show by PolyInnovator. Say hello to the innovators in the audience.
Hello, innovators, and thank you so much, Dustin, for inviting me to be on your show today.
It's a pleasure to have you. And so one way I like to break the ice is to have you share something about yourself that no one knows about you.
Oh, you know what? That's the hard thing because with social media, I feel as if I've already shared a lot. But I guess if we want to go back to my past, some people do know this about me, but I'm sure the majority doesn't. It's not even very interesting, but I'll share it anyway. I've only broken one bone in my body, and of all bones, it was actually my baby toe.
Huh?
So I can't even bend my left baby toe.
Oh,
So
no.
how with the rest of your feet you're able to curl them, it doesn't bend, it just stays straight, because I guess the way the bones fuse back together, they fuse back together weird, so it's very stick straight.
That's fascinating because I actually have only broken two, the clavicle here and then my pinky of all things. So just like your little mini toe.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that you had less flexibility. Now I'm double jointed.
Oh.
So that's really weird. Yeah.
Yeah, very strange.
And then what's interesting too is that like you were mentioning how like your online presence is so good. Like your social SEO is really good. I wanted to mention, like when I looked at your name, Karen Swyszcz, like of course, if I did your maiden name, Karen Yap, it would probably be a little bit more common to see other names. But for that one, like I just found so much just right there.
Yeah, and actually changing my last name, that was kind of the idea, because of course, who doesn't Google themselves, right? So when I did Google myself and my maiden name, I didn't even pop up within the first few pages, all these other people and then people in Asia. And I know that my married name is very hard to spell, hard to pronounce, but at the same time, nobody else has the same first name and last name as myself. At least not right now.
Well, and I made sure before the call too, like Karen Swyszcz, Karen Swyszcz, Karen Swyszcz, just like say it over and over again to make sure I say it right, because it does seem like a hard name to spell. Even you said on one of the other interviews that you messed up sometimes when logging in or something like that.
Yeah, it's funny. A friend of mine actually joked and said it kind of looks like someone smashed their fist against the keyboard, because there's Y, the sometimes vowel, but with respect, it's the majority is consonants. And then even with the pronunciation, Swyszcz is just what we tell everybody. So I tell people think Swyszcz like Isaac. But if we want to get more with respect to the cultural background, my husband, he's half Ukrainian. So if you're curious as to know how it's pronounced, it's more Swyszcz. So a very soft ch sound at the end.
Yeah, Swyszcz. Yeah, I like that. And so you got all your jobs that you've worked on and making the bacon going on. What got you started before all that? What was your mindset?
It's very interesting because it was one of those things. At the time, I was working for the government, so it was very monotonous day job, always looking at the clock, waiting for the time to pass. And around the same time, I was also planning my wedding, looking for ways to make more money to help pay for it. And one of the search results ended up being starting a blog to make money. So of course, being very new, thinking, okay, I can make a lot of money right away after one post setting up my blog. And of course, that wasn't the case. I ended up making a little bit of money eventually, but I had found that the blog provided so much more than that. It was catharsis. So I used to write a lot of poems and poems and stories as a kid growing up. And I had found that blogging had helped rekindle my love for writing. And not only that, it connected me with people in the personal finance community, because I really enjoy talking about money, what are the stocks I'm investing, or what other ETFs I should look into. But I noticed that a lot of people in like my inner circle, friends and family, they didn't really like to talk about that, or they felt money was more of a taboo topic. So it was nice to go online and to see people who were also as enthusiastic about money as I was.
Yeah, I've experienced that recently with these interviews. When I started, I think you actually got way earlier on with it, because when I started my blog, I didn't reach out to very many people. And so I'm glad that you were able to. That makes a big difference there. And I wanted to ask you then, if you like finance so much too, what is your thoughts on cryptocurrency then?
So I don't really have a lot to say on it, but I do feel that it does have a lot of potential, especially when it comes to the developing world, which is unbanked. And I'm thinking that hopefully that there'll be a lot more companies that are interested in providing that, because I've been reading that a lot of startups in the developing world, for example, the country where my parents are from, the Philippines, a large majority of the startups are based in fintech. So it'll be interesting to see where that's going to go. And I myself, I do actually have a little bit of Litecoin, which my husband's aunt had given to us. But to be honest, I haven't checked on it yet. I still feel like I need to educate myself a little bit more on it, but I would like to add that to my portfolio. So not just cryptocurrency ETFs, but actual cryptocurrency itself.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too how much of a deep rabbit hole you'll have to go to learn a lot, because like blockchain on top of the cryptocurrency concepts, there's one thing I think you might find fascinating is the blockchain social platforms. So they use cryptocurrency as a main focus, and so there is Steemit, which eventually evolved into Hive, but it's like a Reddit and Medium had a baby basically.
Oh,
And what's cool about it is that like each of your posts that you make has the potential to make cryptocurrency from it. Someone likes it or makes a comment, it can boost you up the ranking. So not only you get influence, but you also get money from it. And I have an automation for my WordPress site that automatically send it to Hive. So it's
okay.
interesting. Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be like original posts. They can be from your blog.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting.
So it's
I'll
like,
have
might
to
as
check
well.
that out. Yeah,
Yeah.
why not?
And they also have DTube, which is also like a YouTube alternative as well. And it's kind of same ecosystem for that. So going into the questions here, our journeys are surprisingly similar. We both started a blog around the same time in 2012, 2011 is what I can't remember exactly when I started mine, but we're both fitness instructors as well. And so we have an affinity for working through several jobs in life. This is one of the reasons why I thought you'd be a great guest for the show. Can you explain a little bit of your life thus far?
Would you want me to start from university or from my government job?
Where do you feel like it starts for you?
You know what? I would have to say after university, because it was interesting. I am not using my degree, and a lot of people are surprised when I tell them I have a degree, a bachelor's in science in biochemistry, just because growing up I was told, if you get good grades, go to that good school, get a degree, work the job for 25, 30 years, you're set for life. So then at that time I thought, okay, I should try and find something that relates to my degree. But I had actually found through doing a fourth year research project that I didn't want to do my master's. I had no desire to work in a lab. So I thought, okay, I'll try and look for something still science related. So went from project management in a pharmaceutical company to validation with the same company, and then realized I don't really like that. So from there, just kind of bounced around from job to job, trying to figure out what I wanted to do and feeling very isolated when everyone around me, or it felt everyone around me, was on this trajectory. Starting the entry-level job and then slowly working their way up. Now they're middle management, now they're upper management, they're directors. And then I thought to myself, why am I constantly starting over? But the more I thought about it and thinking about it in hindsight, all those steps, all those jobs I took, I felt they had to happen to get me to where I am today and to help provide the story. Because it's great that people have their degrees and they're using them and they have that steady career or that very traditional career, but at the same time, I'll be honest, that doesn't really interest me. I'm really a big fan of reading, listening, watching the story, watching the struggles that they had to endure to get to where they are.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like that interdisciplinary experience you had helped develop who you are. And a lot of the themes that I see with polymaths and people who are interdisciplinary is that they're able to bridge certain areas together. So like you said, that each part of you connected the dots looking back, so to speak. Each of the little steps that you took brought to who you are today. That's interesting too. And so like when you started your podcast, for example, you said on your show that you sat down and thought about the reasons behind why you were doing so, trying to find that why. So what is your why?
The reason for the podcast, it's funny because a few years ago, I think it was back in 2015, that I'm going to start this podcast. And I had pretty much everything set up, the equipment. I hired a graphic designer to create the logo. I even purchased royalty-free music, but sometimes, things happen, life gets in the way. So I actually didn't start it until last year. And reasons for starting it was, number one, okay, I have to start. I've been saying for how many years I was going to do a podcast, so it's better late than never. And then also I found too, a lot of people know me through my writing, and I'm fortunate that to get that feedback that they feel they can relate to me through my writing as well. But I understand that other people might not necessarily consume content through writing. For example, my husband, he prefers to watch videos on YouTube, whereas I prefer to learn via podcasts or books or online courses. So I think by having a podcast, it's a great way for me to connect with people and also for people to get another sense of who I am.
Yeah. I think it's interesting how many people have that kind of scared first time too. Not just like scared, like in the sense of like, I'm scared to do this, but they hear in our own voice or seeing ourselves on camera and that presentation skill. And one good point you made there is actually the reason behind my main series, the Omni content, is that people learn in different manners. Some people want to read, some people want to watch, some people want to listen, some people want to look at a slideshow, for example. And so when I make a post, I make them in all 4 formats. And so, yeah, I agree. So what do you think that you want to do with your next steps for the show?
Well, right now, since it's still in its infancy stage, I'd just like to keep on interviewing more interesting people. When I first started, it was originally more interviewing freelancers and small business owners, but the direction I want to take it, I want to focus more on the Bytes part, the BYTES. So the more tech part, I'm really fascinated with tech startups, people in tech related roles, as well as the investors, the venture capitalists who invest in the tech startups. So I think that's where I would like to go. So mainly just being consistent is really my goal.
How often do you want to post?
So with respect to the podcast, I've been posting every other week. I'm a one-woman show, and I think you're also a solo podcaster as well. So you can definitely relate to the amount of work that goes into, especially when you're doing an interview podcast, because you need to research, you need to find what kind of questions to ask. I had debated about doing a solo podcast, but then I realized I can't have a conversation with myself for an hour. I did the first couple episodes as introductory. I think they were about 7 to 10 minutes, and already I thought to myself, I can't talk anymore about myself. I'm not actually a person who really talks so much about themselves. I'm more of the person who enjoys having a one-to-one conversation, and I'm pretty sure it's based on my personality type. So last time I did the Myers-Briggs personality test, I was an INTP, so very introverted.
It's interesting. I like to know if someone who's introverted, extroverted when they come on the show. When I heard you say that you were an introvert on another show, I made sure I wrote that down. So it's good to know, because like I don't want to overwhelm you or emotionally wise, because sure, these conversations are fun and they're exhilarating at times too. But if you keep asking so many questions or get too overbearing, like I get to be really teachy at times. I don't want, like, let me know if I get too teachy, Karen.
Oh no,
but I was saying like it's interesting because I don't want to I want to respect your personality. And what's interesting is that there's different formats, different kind of shows. Audio can be super short, like 5 to 7 minutes. It could be medium sized, 15 to 30, or long form like we're making now. And that's how I approached my show. So I wonder if maybe your solo cast should just be short little idea rants, and then have the long form just be the interviews. Don't force yourself to be long.
Yeah, that's true. That's actually a really good idea. I can put it in between the interviews. But yeah, I just wanted to circle back to the introvert, because I have been reading a lot more about introverts. I actually joined a Facebook group for introverts, and there's a website that's really interesting for anybody out there who identifies as an introvert. It's called introvertdear.com. But there's some really fascinating articles on that site, and I think one of them has to do talking about the different little quirks with introverts. So as you were saying, you didn't want to overwhelm me, but I find that actually my, I guess, extrovertedness comes out when I'm having a very stimulating one-to-one conversation. Whereas I tend to get more overwhelmed when it's a very large group. I'm not sure who to talk to, or it seems a group of 2 people, they're having a conversation. This group of 3 is having a conversation. I'm not really sure how to dive into. Whereas, if it's one-to-one, okay, I know for sure I have to talk to you. So it just makes things a lot easier.
Well, and not to dig too much on the Myers-Briggs, because there is mixed results on the validity of it, but there is a personality of like introverted or extroverted. That is true. But what they found, a lot of studies talk about how most people are on a spectrum. They're more ambiverted. They're not one side or the other. I'm an ambivert, for example, but I lean more towards extroversion. So talking to people, even in groups, gets me excited.
Oh, okay. I still think though I'm introverted because every time when I look, because it does give percentages of what you are for each letter, and I'm usually about 99% introverted.
That's interesting, because it's interesting too. So a lot of my greatest friends in life have been introverts, so maybe that's a good sign.
Yeah, and another thing, it's just funny. I feel as if we could even have a separate podcast episode on introversion and extroversion. But a lot of people find it really interesting because, as you had mentioned in the intro, that I'm a fitness instructor. So of course, getting up on stage and leading a class, of course you need to have energy and be extroverted. But I tell people usually as soon as I'm done the class, I feel as if my energy has been sucked out of me, not in a bad way, but it was just very like challenging and invigorating. And now I need to go back to my corner and read a book.
So firstly, I'm going to mark you off as open to return so we can talk about personalities next time. And then secondly, like I said, I'm more extroverted, but when I teach my fitness classes, like I have one after you today, like I'm going to go eat, then go teach the class, water aerobics, ironically. And
Cool.
The funny thing is, it's exhilarating to teach, but afterwards I feel so drained because it's just like, it does take so much effort.
Yeah. And then again, too, I'm not a naturally like happy, bubbly person. I feel I'm very more cynical, as if I was to state what kind of Care Bear I would be, I'm definitely more of a grumpy bear.
Well, I haven't noticed, even on the interviews I saw of you before, so that's good. And then, so actually, I wanted to mention too, your Bacon Bits and Bytes, I'm going to make sure I get that right, podcast is actually a lot like my Polymath podcast, where in the sense we both wanted to share more topics and ideas beyond what our umbrella, like your blog and overarching brand, was known for. And I think that's really interesting because we use audio as a medium to share the more divergent topics, so to speak. So what particular areas are you fond of?
It's very interesting. And I think it has to stem from the fact that the blog originally started as a personal finance blog, or I claim to say that it was, because to be honest, I felt it was more an everything blog because I blogged about career, relationships, travel, but I also blogged about personal finance. So certain articles such as how my mom got me into investing, or why you need to price match. But circling back to the original question, what area really interests me now? I think venture capital. So just the idea of being able to invest in companies, not to say that I'll be able to invest in the next Uber or the next Facebook, but I think it's really interesting to be able to play a role in how those companies will grow, and also to provide some insight. And again, like just going back to my portfolio, I would like to diversify. So on top of the cryptocurrency, I would like to also invest in startups as well.
So 2 points I want to make off of that, Karen, is that we talked about in the beginning before our recording, stealing guests. I had Alex Dunstan, like he was a great guest on the show, and he's a venture capitalist. He's super interesting. You might steal him off of that. And then secondly, do you know much about like lifetime deals? Because you're a techie, obviously you might have come across them, but like LTD offers?
I'll be honest, I haven't heard of that term.
So like AppSumo and some of these other deal sites where new startups, most of the time they have funding from either VC or just they're bootstrapping it or something like that. And they make a really nice product, but they need users to iterate and change how the product works. So like my email marketing tool, for example, or even my podcast host, are companies that I paid for like a short fee, like $50, $60, and it's a lifetime deal. So I'm with them forever now, but it's because they want to get users on their platform to use it quickly. I almost see it as kind of like investing in that company as well, because they need people on there. And when you go there early on, then you're getting kind of like we're both founding members of Matchmaker. That's a lifetime deal right there.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Then yeah, that makes sense. I also wanted to add to so I've kind of started to ask more questions or look into how I can get started on the VC path. So I'm not sure, maybe you've heard of them, but there is this platform called Republic, and you can invest smaller amounts of money, I think even as little as $5 or $10, and invest in companies. So I guess kind of similar to crowdfunding, but in the sense like you get to have a piece of that company. So I think I might be looking into that very shortly.
That's super interesting. That's actually kind of the point of these interviews as well, to be divergent. And you said that you have that personal finance background and you want to go more into venture capital. It's kind of obviously like a finance or fintech kind of theme. You have your technology bits, you have your and Bytes and various different areas. So where do you see yourself finding the time for all your desired topics?
Time, yes, that's really interesting.
Especially as a solopreneur.
The thing is, the way I see it, and I don't know if this sounds kind of all wishy-washy, but you make time for the things that are important to you. And I'm that type of person who likes to set goals, but also likes to take action. And I'm a list maker. So what I try and do is, because I have the freedom and flexibility to structure my days, is to try and block off either half days or certain days to work on things. So let's say, for example, today we're recording a podcast interview. So since I knew that we were going to be recording a podcast interview on this date, I tried to schedule other meetings around this date. So I know that this could kind of be a day full of meetings, because I had found in the past when I would try to schedule meetings every day, I felt you're kind of in a certain mindset when you're doing an interview, right? So to try and disrupt that and get into a different kind of flow, say such as trying to write a blog post, I found it very difficult to get back into that. So I specifically try to schedule the majority of my meetings from Tuesday to Thursday, whereas Monday to Friday would be either admin work, writing blog posts, or editing podcast episodes. And then also with respect to my many interests, I've been trying to schedule a little bit of time prior to diving into work. So say, for example, today I did a quick workout, but then after my workout, I had my coffee and then also was reading a little bit. And then sometimes, depending on if my brain is up for it, I'll try to get through a lesson or two on courses that I'm taking on LinkedIn Learning.
Even just before this interview, I did 20 push-ups to try to get my blood flowing. So yeah, I get
nice.
you. Yeah, that's interesting, because I don't know, have you used Notion at all?
No, I haven't heard of them.
Notion.so, it's a tool that combines not Google Docs, but documents and sheets, like as in tables and databases and Kanban boards, all into one intricate system. And it's interesting because each line of a database, for example, can be its own document, which I found to be revolutionary when it comes to blogging, planning your stuff ahead. And I've been trying to build a life operating system in there, and what you're saying are stuff that I'm trying to implement in there. So for example, like a morning routine, getting each habit in a row, then checking it off on that system. So that's really interesting there. Where have you found your own rhythm? So we're talking about personality types. There's also things like our circadian rhythms and our sleep chronotypes, when we get our energy throughout the day. Where do you find your energy kind of coming in?
It's interesting. I'm not a morning person. If we're defining a morning person as someone who wakes up at 5 or 6 a.m., nor am I a night person who gets their work done 11 p.m. at midnight. But I've found, with respect to where my energy is the highest, I'd say around mid-morning. So between 9 and 10. I'm sure after the workout, after having the coffee, that definitely helps. But it's strange in that also, when you're making up your own schedule, I will have random bursts of energy. Yesterday was Labor Day, but the weather wasn't too great where I was. It was raining a bit, and then it just seemed overcast. And I thought, okay, I'll do some work. And for whatever reason, I ended up having a little burst of energy. So I was able to do a little bit of work between 7 to 9 p.m., which it does happen. It's very rare. So yeah, I definitely say between 9 and 10 a.m.
Interesting, because each person's rhythm is different. And so, for example, my hours are 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. for some reason, both. And I'm a night owl. I will identify as that, but even in 10 a.m. too. So it's interesting how you and I both align with that 10 a.m. time. But I wonder if 10 p.m. might actually be better for you or not. I'm not sure. But yeah, that's interesting too, because how you plan your content creation schedule, for example, like when you make a podcast and when you make a polycast, in my case, like I try to base it off of that. So what have you found to be really good for that?
With respect to scheduling, you know what the funny thing is? I'm going to have a little confession. I don't schedule. I'm not as stringent as scheduling, because I find sometimes that my ideas just come at random. But again, when I have that random burst of energy on, say, Sunday or Monday morning, I'll try and schedule. So I'm not really as consistent as I'd like to be, as I was in the past, because I found that now that I'm adding a podcast onto my plate, it's becoming a little bit tougher to be more consistent with the blog. But I found, though, having show notes from the podcast and being able to repurpose them and put it onto the blog, that has kind of helped provided content. So a lot of the times people have always asked me, like, you're pretty consistent, or you have a lot of content on your blog. How are you getting that done? So I usually tell them, a lot of the times I'll ask people to guest post, or I'll do blog interviews. Yes, with the blog interview, you still have to do a little bit of work, but the majority of the content is coming from the interviewer, right? Because they're providing you with the responses.
Yeah, that's interesting. And what's cool about a lot of different content types too, and you were mentioning how if you can repurpose things, that's really important. If you can manage your time like that, it's like, hey, I have this piece of content, let's make it into something else. Again, not talking too much about myself, but my Omni content is exactly, I made it for that reason. So I could repurpose my blog post into a video, into a polycast, and try to save time. Something you mentioned earlier that really hit home to me was that when you get in the mindset of making one type of content, sometimes it's hard to go back to like a blog post, for example. And my first step of the Omni content is blogging, and I've had a hard time actually getting back into that. So I'm really curious to see how you might have ways of getting yourself out of burnout. Oh, and one more thing is that your creative cycles, you creating based off of when you get the energy, I think is really interesting too, because that means you have more powerful output, that your posts are even more powerful than they might be if you forced it. So respect to you for that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's just so strange with respect to ideas, because with creativity, and when you have that title as a content creator, it's almost as if you kind of feel that pressure to put out a lot of content. But it's funny. I'm, again, just going back to a tried and true mantra: quality over quantity. Couple of good blog posts a month is better than really five really crappy ones. I'd rather see somebody put out their best effort. So with respect to ideas, it's really funny because sometimes they happen at the most random time. So sometimes I'll actually try, and I should get back into the habit of doing this, is keeping a notebook on my nightstand. Because sometimes as I'm falling asleep, I'll have an idea, and I'm paranoid that I'm going to forget it when I wake up. So I'll sometimes just jump out of my bed and like run to the office and just scribble that idea. So at least I have it paper, or when I'm driving or in the shower. It's just so strange, like when the ideas come up. So I actually go through a lot of notebooks. So I've bought, just to save money, I tend to buy them from like the dollar store, or in here it's called Dollarama. So
That's crazy. No, I'm fascinated by the neuroscience behind that. And the reason why that happens is that when you get to a sleepy state, or like when you're in the shower, you get into a more alpha wave state in the brain. And that's where your creativity starts to blossom. So that's why when you're in the shower, you have that great idea. And when you're out of it, once you leave the shower, you get back into a different state, you forget about it. So it's actually good that you write it down, because you will forget about it. And so if anyone's listening in, if you feel like you're going to, I'm going to remember it tomorrow morning, no, you won't. No, you forget.
I tell everyone, just write it down. I go through so many pens and so many notebooks and Post-its, just write it down.
So I don't know who this was, and I'm so mad that I can't remember who it was, but there was some author who wanted to take advantage of that. And so he attached a bell to like a string around his head. And so when he would like sit there in his chair and start to fall asleep, it would ring the bell and wake him up. So when he had that great idea, he could like write it down right away.
That's so funny.
So going back to the questions here, on your interview with MCV Communications, she called you a blogging high priestess, and I love that. Where do you think you could run with that, and do you, and that you creatively where can you run with that?
It's funny because that interview was done a while back, so I don't even remember. But yeah, thanks to Elizabeth for calling me that. The thing is, now my focus has kind of been more on the podcast and my social ventures. So I don't really talk so much about blogging with respect to the how-to, but more so as the why you should do it, just getting yourself out there. And with respect to being with the pandemic going on, a lot of people are spending more time online. So even if you're not thinking of starting a blog, just any type of any type of project. I mean, showing, hey guys, I'm starting to relearn the guitar. Hey, I learned how to knit. Just putting yourself out there. I'm a big believer of, because people always ask me too, they'll often, ask, oh, how did you meet this person? How did you get this opportunity? And I just tell them, I ask. I have no problem with asking. And I feel the worst the worst response you can get is a no, but even a no isn't that bad. It's more so, okay, that's a no, or maybe it might be a not right now, so I can move on to the next thing. I think the worst thing really is a no response, because then it kind of leaves you hanging. But then again, I understand people are really busy, but I'll follow up a few times, but usually after the second or third follow up, I'll be like, okay, it's not really worth it at this time. Maybe I'll follow up again in a few weeks or so. But yeah, all about creating opportunities for yourself.
Yeah, and I try to catch people when they're releasing like a new book or something like that. And here's a shameless plug for matchmaker.fm. Like, that's how we met. I love it. Yeah. When did you join? Because I was one of the first 50 members.
You know what? Probably around the same time. And to be honest, I don't even remember how I joined. I don't know if it was through social media or I got an invite through email, but I'm very grateful that I joined and put my profile up, because I've been able to get a lot of guests on my show and then also be guests on other people's shows. And I've also been recommending it to other people, because they've been asking me, how are you on all these podcasts, or how do I get on the podcast? And I tell them, put your profile on matchmaker.fm.
Yeah. Well, and I always say that I don't call this a podcast, I call it a polycast. So this is your first polycast.
My apologies. This first polycast.
Yeah, it's first polycast. It's a nice experience there. And I think the CEO of podcast.co, who's the one that made Matchmaker, I actually had him on my show too. I think he actually reached out to people on LinkedIn or something like that on social media. That's how he got a lot of people. I just got an email from podcast.co and I was like, okay, I'll join it. It's interesting because I wanted to start interviews a while back, but never got around to figuring out how it was. And like you said, it is just like reaching out to people and asking. One of my biggest pet peeves is like, oh, what's your metrics? How many people do you have? That's like the only decision-making thing they have about it versus like, hey, this show is actually unique. Like your Bits and Bytes podcast is super unique. The polycast is about polymaths. Like
it's almost as if I want to kind of like jump in and rant about that along with you, because if you focus on the numbers again, I think you're missing out on a lot of great podcasts. And just, we were talking about this before we started recording. I was very interested by the fact that you called it a polycast and that you resonated with me being a multi-potentialite, having a lot of interest, and even something as small as crafting a personalized message versus saying, hello, I'd like to be on your show. And you end up getting a lot of those. And it's kind of like, I don't know, it doesn't really grab my attention, but when somebody even just calls me by my name or just says, hey, I really think your profile is interesting, or hey, I'm really intrigued by your show, I'd love to be a guest, that is enough for me to want to check them out and be like, okay, I think I might consider you.
Yeah. Well, and when it comes to Matchmaker too, I've been at fault of just sending the traditional message, hey, I want to be on your show. But that was because oftentimes it would be because their profile was incomplete. Like I hate going on someone's profile. I actually made a video on how to make a good Matchmaker profile, because that's how upset I was getting about it. Because it's like, you go on there, they have no links, they only have one little short paragraph, and that's it. So those are the profiles that you should be like, hey, I want to be on your show, and don't really do much about it because there's not much I can work off of. With your profile, there's a lot going on, so it's easy to like, hey, you are like multi-potentialite. I can tell just because of the text you have right there.
Yeah.
On everything else.
It's saying, don't be afraid to toot your horn, just link away.
Yes. I filled up all the links that I could.
Yeah, exactly.
So one thing I often ask is like principles and whatnot. And so you're talking about embracing failure. So how can we embrace failure and move past it?
And this is coming from a former perfectionist. So anything less than perfect was not.
Love it.
I think it's important to embrace failure, to not really see it as a failure. And it's funny because I did an interview with someone talking about failure and how we were talking about how in school, or at least when I went to school, failure was never really encouraged. There's always, okay, you need to have like A's in order to be considered smart, to be good at this. And it just seems so linear. Whereas a failure, now that I'm thinking about it, all the times that I have so-called failed, they were really great learning experience. And again, sometimes failures aren't even failures. It's more, okay, this is not going to work out. So we can have room, you can have the headspace to work on this instead, because this is better suited for you.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's almost as if I'm like, yeah, I've become a pro at failing. Like, sure, it
Yeah.
doesn't work. Move on. All right, let's go. Lots of other things.
And that's the whole idea behind the lean startup mentality too, is like fail quickly and just move on. And as personal trainer, I have a client who like failed at doing a proper squat with a weight the other day, and he got so upset about it. It's like, that's okay. You need to have the practice to do it. And I had a swim lesson too, who same thing. I told her to do something, and she was afraid of failing. And it's like, I don't care. I want you to fail so that we can move on and find out why you failed, because I can't know what's impairing you until I see it.
Yeah, it's almost as if too, if you're hesitant or afraid to try, that's also a failure as well, versus actually try them. Okay, you tried, you failed, that's progress. Try again, make the improvements.
Hashtag failing to try.
Yeah, good one.
And I think it was off camera, but I actually did do the whole little hashtag with the fingers too, which was really cringy, really cringy. From meat hygiene inspector to scraper, and even now a blogger, podcaster, content creator, your life has definitely had that interdisciplinary spin to it. What motivated you to try so many different things? So speaking of trying.
I guess it had to do with working at the government and meat hygiene inspector. Unfortunately, no matter how much effort I put in, I felt really stuck. And I was also getting worried too, again, with my peers progressing much quicker. I thought to myself, would I be able to spend 25 to 30 years or even a few more years still stuck and not growing? So again, coming from someone who is a big believer in goals, achieving your goals, setting new goals, it felt like a hindrance to me. So starting that blog and then using that blog as leverage to leave my government job and join that ad tech startup, I felt was the beginning, and just kind of made me want to try all these different things. So after having that stint at the startup, I felt like, okay, well, why not try this? Why not try starting my own business? And actually just going back to becoming a fitness instructor, I felt that also kind of gave me confidence, because it's a weird story, or not necessarily a weird story, but it was just one of those things where I saw fitness instructors in the class and I thought, that looks like fun. That looks easy. I think I could do it. I could try it. And of course I got my ASS kicked in the training because I had no idea what to expect, but I persevered. Mm-hmm. And I've been doing that for over 11 years now. So it's kind of interesting. And to be honest, I feel out of all the things I've done, that is on my top 3 as to the most hardest things I've ever had to achieve.
Yeah. I keep seeing this kind of common theme between us too, is that you're slightly farther ahead of me in some areas. So like you started your blog around the same time, but you got progress much quicker than I did. You started doing your personal training before I did. And I was like, what can I learn from her right now? Because I just need to, like, she's ahead of me. What can I learn?
Well, if it makes you feel any better, sorry, I didn't mean to interject, but with respect to personal training, I did personal training I didn't even make it to a year. I did it for about 8 months and gave up quickly. However, I felt I was better suited as a group fitness instructor. But then again, what if I had persevered and put in more time and effort into it? Maybe I would have been further along.
Well, and personal training also has a lot of issues with the whole like certification, continuing education. Like I love learning, but when you're forced to do it, it's a little bit more annoying. So I've only been personal trainer for a year and a half. So it's again the fitness classes that we are aligned with. I feel like there, because it's just one of those things where when you go into that class and you're ready to go, the experience you get from those people is so fascinating.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I absolutely love it. Like I'm not teaching as of right now because of the pandemic, but
yeah.
But just thinking about like the class, is you built this rapport. I think my permanent classes, I think like every Saturday morning, I love my ladies. They're like, how are you doing? And I'll be like, woo. And I just, the energy is like the rush you get as if you're performing at a rock concert. And then not only that too, it's like the conversations you have with them, or when they get deep and tell you their personal stuff that they're going through and saying like, this class has helped me. Thank you so much. And then also, not only that, seeing the progression. I've had members come to my classes for years. So to see them go from barely being able to do a push-up on their knees to doing several push-ups on their toes is absolutely phenomenal. It's almost as if I feel like I'm a proud parent. Like, oh my God.
The girls, I have a running joke in my class where I'm like, I'm so proud. They grow up so fast. And it's funny because a lot of the times since I teach water aerobics, most of my clientele are like in their 60s. So yeah, it's funny. What do you think that the point of working multiple jobs that you've had have brought you, do you think? My question's weird, so answer it how you will.
I think I know what you're asking. Multiple jobs, I think it gives you the freedom and flexibility to do whatever you want. And again, it kind of ties into, I think, being a multi-potentialite is probably the reason why I work multiple jobs. And also tying back into multiple streams of income. So at one point, I was working in retail, but then I was also working my fitness instructor job as well. So I don't know. I think it's just having, and again, just think about like the gig economy too. It's not, abnormal to have multiple jobs now.
Yeah.
I think before it used to be just, okay, this is my 9-to-5 job, but now people are realizing with the internet and the potential it has, you can start an online business, you can do consulting, you can have a e-commerce site. I feel, people should look into multiple jobs because as we know now, no job really is truly stable.
Yeah. Well, in the next 10, 20 years, as you know, from being like interviewing people in the Bytes part of the podcast, there's a lot of changes going on the tech front, and there's a lot of new things going on. A lot of projections are actually talking about how you're going to need multiple different like freelance gigs and whatnot. I also love, Karen, how we really were similar. Like I worked a retail job at a health food store as well as the fitness stuff at the same time. So yes, and then on top of that, the side hustle on top of that too. So again, and for someone, since I did set that up question very properly, you did answer it very well. So good job.
Thank you.
This actually leads me to my next question too, because I see multipotentialite as like the opposite end of the spectrum to a polymath, so to speak. So something I ask all my guests is, what is a polymath to you?
I'm not even sure. Maybe I might not even really know the proper definition of a polymath, but I feel a polymath is someone who has deep knowledge in multiple disciplines, whereas multipotentialite, I think, maybe is almost like the precursor to a polymath, has like potential to do great things in a lot of different things and the potential to combine a lot of things together to create even more great things. So you can tell me if I'm totally off on that one.
Oh, no, you're totally on. Like the only thing I would say is missing is like as a polymath is not just an expert in many areas, but also someone who wants to learn many areas. So it's kind of like a sub definition, so to speak. Most people don't know about that part. So you were on point. And in fact, it's actually almost textbook there. So I'm like, suspicious.
I swear I did not study before this polycast.
Well, at least you said the polycast right. That's good. I can't tell you how many times I tell people like, hey, it's a polycast, not a podcast. And they still say podcast the whole time. At least you correct yourself. So thank you.
Yeah, the fact that you initially said that, I tried to make a mental note in my brain. Okay, if you're going to say that word, say it properly.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, like, the reason why, first off, I have a, what's the word? What's the opposite of affinity? I loathe Apple. There we go.
You loathe Apple?
Yes.
So you have an Android phone?
Yes. I
do too.
Yeah, Team Android. What's interesting is that my phone died a week and a half ago. Just died. I charged it all night. It was dead. The battery had to become kaput. So I've been going out without a phone for like a week and a half now. It's been painful. Wow. I just got my new phone in today, my Pixel 3. I'm so happy about it.
You know what's funny? I have a Google Pixel, but I'm Pixel too. Like,
hey, it's still good.
Uncanny.
Yes. Well, and okay, so here's a real test there. Do you have Google Fi?
Google Fi, no.
Okay, it's really good. If you spend a lot of money on your bill, you might check it out. So pivoting a bit, the major theme of the first phase of PolyInnovator, and this is actually something I wanted to mention to you, is that I've tried to approach it in phases. So you have all these different interests, and I wanted to make a way that us aspiring polymaths or people who want to do many different things can approach it in a more systematic way. So phases of what we want to work on, self-education for me, and then exercise and later on the line. For you, it's like right now it's focusing on finance. Whatever your next phase might be on, you can have an idea of what you're going to do next, so to speak. And I wanted to actually ask you about that because my first phase is about self-education. And blogging helped land you a tech job at a startup with no formal education or experience. So what did that feel like?
I had no idea what I was doing, actually. To be honest, I think the first few weeks I was kind of having minor panic attacks. Like, oh my God, I'm going to get fired. I don't know what I'm doing. Why did they choose me? But then at the same time, I was able to prove myself. And I thought, you know what, you're capable. You can learn relatively quickly. You can prove yourself. So yeah, it was just only a matter of time. But sorry, what was the question again?
No, I mean,
going on that tangent.
No, it's good. Your tangent answered the question in a way, because it's just like it felt like you had that imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
It seems like, that's if I'm correct there, or even a micro imposter syndrome. And I feel like with solopreneurs like this, that's something that happens a lot. I don't know if I felt it much myself, and you can tell me if you have or not in your own blogging experience, but it's interesting how getting past that imposter syndrome seems to be such a big hurdle. But self-education is almost more powerful than formal education in many ways. So it's almost as if we, not to be boastful, but we know more than people who went to school. Like if you go to school for a marketing degree, the stuff you and I learn on our blogs and podcasts that we want to look into, we're going to learn something that's way more applicable and modern than what you would learn in a degree. So where do you feel like you might have had imposter syndrome?
You know, it's funny because you're going to laugh. I feel I have imposter syndrome every time I try something new. And I've tried a lot of things. So I constantly feel the imposter syndrome. But I think with the more things I've tried, the feeling has become less. And also with respect to what success is being defined, I think maybe because a lot of people are so hung up on the traditional idea of success. Oh, okay, if you're making $1 million and you have those fancy cars, that's success. But I've realized now that to me, success is living a purposeful life and being able to do the things you want to do. So how I've been trying to get over the imposter syndrome is really to take action on the things I don't know, like identify my weaknesses. Okay, I don't really know that. I don't understand that. I'm going to try and take those steps day by day or week by week to learn. And then I realize after kind of looking back on what I've learned or what I've done, I think to myself, okay, actually I'm not an imposter syndrome. Like I've been able to do these things and learn these things, and I'm putting myself out there. That's not what an imposter syndrome does, or someone with imposter syndrome does.
Right. Well, and it's interesting too, because that power of self-education, this teaching yourself, and hey, if I don't know this, you can learn it. So even if you didn't know it well enough when you got hired, you could still go and learn more after you got hired. And I feel like with self-education, you can learn a lot quicker too. And so you can, if you don't know, or if you do know, and you just want to feel better about yourself, you can go out and do it right away.
Yeah, it's funny because my mom, she's aware of all my different interests. So she's always asking me. It's so funny because she would say to me, I'm low tech, you're high tech. Can you help me? And then she asks me, and when I show her how to do things, or I tell her about this new platform or this new feature, she said, how did you know about it? And I said, I Google it. Everything pretty much these days is Googleable, if that's even a word.
Yeah, no, I think it is. And it's interesting too, because many companies, I don't know where I saw this. I've been looking at so many different things lately, but they're talking about how school is failing us, and school prepares you to know things and then be ready to spit it out. But when you go to a job, they don't care what you know. They care what you can learn and work with other people and be able to Google well. It's really hard actually to Google something really well. If you want to learn something deeply, you have to go on to swap information, which is actually leads to another question I have down the line, because you and I both having a lot of tabs going on. So when we want to learn something, we'll open up 20, 50 tabs.
Yeah.
Let me find that question too.
It's funny that you mentioned that as you're looking for that question, because on Twitter, I asked the other day, how many tabs do you have? I'm at 22. And then people were like 4, 5. I thought, wow, you're disciplined.
So that I found the question pretty quickly there. So one of your tweets I really liked, which is the one you just mentioned there, is like, how are you, this was mentioned you had 20 tabs open. That is a great way to get a swap of information, like I said, so quickly. So say when you are learning something new, like a new marketing skill or something, what are some things that you've been learning recently, for example?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to add one more thing having with the 20 tabs. So I think one of the reasons why I've gotten so used to having tabs in the double digits is that my work setup in my home office is 2 screens. So once you go to 2 screens, you cannot go back.
Okay, so I don't know how I'm going to do this because I don't know how much cable tension I have. So I'm going to just flex a little bit here and drop stuff. So 1, 2, and then 3.
Oh, I love it. You're like Minority Report.
Yes. Once you go 2 screens, you can't go back. I totally agree. In fact, I only use like 2 screens at a time right now, but it is nice having multiple. And one example actually that I'm going to interject my experience real quick, because with Matchmaker, since the beginning, I've been going through each and every guest and show and looking at every profile to see if anyone
you're
fit.
dedicated.
Yeah. And the crazy part is when we both were on there was like 17 pages, 13 pages, and you can go through it pretty quickly. Open them all. I go through each page, open up a new tab if someone looks interesting. I'll look at them later. Now there's 90 pages.
Wow.
So my last time I did that is how I found you. I went through 90 people, 90 tabs, each with like probably 30 people on each page,
Oh,
and
wow.
went through all of that. So just feel a little bit special considering how many people I went
Wow.
through.
I appreciate your dedication.
And so yeah, what are some things you've been learning recently that you've had a ton of tabs open?
So what I've been learning recently having to do with cryptocurrency. So I've been trying to learn more about blockchain technology. Another thing I've also been trying to learn, and I'll be honest, I haven't gotten back to it, is Python.
Mm.
And then another course, that's my problem too. I have multiple courses going, is also just having to do with editing audio. So I've been taking a course on Audacity because that's what I've been using to edit my audio. And the thing is, like with each of those things, you can just go down a rabbit hole. But the thing is, I'm almost equally interested in all of those things. I'm like, I want to learn more. I really want to learn. And I'm the type of person when I feel going back to how we're taught in school or how we learn things, I don't just want to be able to regurgitate the information. I really want to like understand it and then also be able to talk about it and explain it to people, because I feel that's also another way how you know you've acquired the right amount of knowledge. Yeah, the concrete knowledge that you're able to actually explain it to somebody, and they're and then a little think about it and go, oh yeah, that makes sense. I understand now.
So okay, I've been getting this vibe this entire time about it and wanted to mention it. Now that you say that, I have to pitch something to you at this point. So essentially, the first phase of my content's been around self-education through what I call the modular degree. So I actually started the personal brand PolyInnovator to be a documentation process of me going through my own, because I found that I couldn't find any traditional education that I wanted that helped me to get where I wanted to be. So I decided, screw it. There's tons of courses and YouTube videos and podcasts and blogs and all that stuff online. Let's make a way to organize it in a way to actually execute properly. And so it's people like you who I'm actually trying to target after. It's people who want to find a way to systematically apply that. And so there's one concept that I've been working on, is skill tree based learning, where if you have a course, such as with blogging, well, you need to know how to write. You need to know how to set up WordPress. You need to know how to set up your SEO. It doesn't really matter per se. Like I just said that in a row, but like you need to know all of those things at basically the same time. Well, which one do you want to learn first? Well, it's whichever one you want to learn about first. If I want to learn about SEO, I don't care about setting up WordPress just yet. I'm just curious about it. I'm going to dig into it. So a skill tree based course, if you want to learn how to start doing your own blogging, will allow you to go down each one of those branching paths at whatever point you want to. If you want to go down SEO, boom, go there. I got bored. Let's go down how to make a website first. That kind of thing.
Interesting.
So that's what I've been trying to build. And so just even right now explaining it to you, something I've been working on, it's like, how can I explain it simply to make it interesting to people like that?
Yeah, no, the fact that you're talking about skill tree based learning, I think will definitely come in handy, considering the fact that online courses have just exploded. Everybody is taking online courses, and I'm sure they may have the same issues as myself, trying to figure out like, oh, how can I learn? Can you create some sort of specific learning path for me?
Well, and that's what I want to try to do, because right now it's more self-curated, and what I was going to do is kind of coach in a way for free at this point, because I want to get it built, because it's about revolutionizing education, not just doing it, but also changing the way we approach it. Because the way we approach online education is very linear. If you go take a MOOC right now on Coursera, it's one module after the other. Not only that, it's like if you want to do a specialization, it's one course right after the other. You can't even switch around in a way. So I just found it very frustrating. And there's only 4% of people who actually finish their courses.
Yeah, so that's another thing too.
Yeah.
Like it's trying to get people to finish the course.
And I think that has to do with like learning too. Like, are you interested in it? Like you said, when you're interested in something, you're going to go after it. But if you get bored of a course, there's a lot of, not penalty, but there's no repercussions behind it. There's no alternatives. If you get bored of a course, you just finish the course, versus with a modular degree, if you get bored of a course, you switch to a different course. So yeah, going back to the questions here, because I don't want to talk too much about myself, but I just thought you would really love that. We both started blogging almost a decade ago. It's insane to think about how it's evolved since 2000, really, not just even 2010. So what are some trends that you've seen and have been seeing lately as well? So it's kind of 2 in 1.
I guess what I've been seeing, and this has to do with the way WordPress has changed their editor, because when we started blogging, it was the classic. And now that it's the Gutenberg, I think I know, and I've talked to some WordPress developers. I'm not a WordPress developer, but some of them said they don't really like it. But I personally, I find it better with respect to setting up blog posts and pages, and I feel it's easier. And I think by doing that, they've kind of leveled the playing field a little bit more for people, because I found like a lot of people were very hung up on creating a site thinking that, oh my gosh, I don't know how to code, I want to set up a site. But now we know not just for WordPress, but other website builders such as Squarespace and Wix, even though I am partial to WordPress, but there are other options if you want to create a site and just put your stuff out there. So I think that is one of the trends. And I think another trend that I've seen is that this, and I'm going to say this is kind of like unfortunate, but I wish people would focus a little bit more on the content, because I think a lot of people, based on what they're seeing out there, they're very hung up on, oh, this person made $10,000 a month blogging, I want to do that, I can do that. And I see a lot of blog posts, especially on Pinterest, that are really focused on the numbers, saying like how to make $5,000 dollars per month, how to get 10,000 views. And I get it, the numbers are good, the numbers are great, but I think people get so hung up on that sometimes they forget that one of the major things about blogging is to get your story out there, to provide value, to find your community, to create that community and build that community. At least that's what I believe.
Yeah. So many things I can go off of there. For one, I hate the idea of a persona, but I know how important it is. And I think that before you start worrying about numbers, find out who you're talking to. So when I introduced you, I said, please say hello to the innovators in the audience. And like, I literally have hashtag innovators when I say that there, because it's one of those things where that's who I'm trying to talk to. It's the people who are trying to make a change. And it took me a while to find out who that was after blogging for many years. And it's interesting how once you find that person or that kind of people that you want to talk to, who is your tribe, so to speak, like you, believers, if you're a Justin Bieber fan or something like that. I'm not, but it's just a good example. And so it's just one of those things where find who you're talking to, make quality posts for them, and that's what's going to make it grow. And or find some kind of niche. Like for me, I have an anti-niche. Polymathy is my niche, if you will, but that's almost an anti-niche by nature because it's many different things. And once I realized that, I was able to blossom a lot more. So it's like, okay, I don't like being confined to just one topic. What was the other thing I was going to say? Is that, oh yeah, I can't stand WordPress. Like, I've used it. My site's on WordPress right now. I started out with WordPress.com, which obviously is not a good way to go about it. You want to do .org. That's everyone can agree most of the time on that. And then I moved to Wix, and I don't know what your history is. Have you just stuck on WordPress the whole time?
Yeah, you know what? I've stuck with WordPress through and through. I haven't had any issues with it. And I know for some people they find, I also teach a course at a local college, and some people have gotten hung up. They found it if they felt it was too much of a technical hurdle. But again, I'm that person liking to learn. I like to figure things out and poke around. So WordPress worked for me. And even though it can be a little bit of work trying to like customize with plugins and stuff, I still enjoy it, to be honest.
Well, and what I found was it was because I was using WordPress.com that caused me to have many issues with it, because there was a big learning hurdle on, it's not just WordPress, but you have to learn how to host. You have to learn how to do all the other stuff. That's the real kind of kicker gets, I think. But once you find a way to do it easily, then the learning curve to WordPress now, especially with Gutenberg, I feel like is a lot easier. Yeah, I also try to think of the idea of minimalism, using as little plugins as possible. And so I use Elementor to design my site. Do you have any particular plugins that you use for a page builder? Or just Gutenberg?
Yeah, I've just been using Gutenberg.
Interesting, because I tried doing that. I even used a plugin to enhance Gutenberg, but I couldn't quite make it. Maybe it's because this was back when Gutenberg first came out, but I don't know. It's interesting. It's like I find it fascinating that you're using Gutenberg for it now. That's awesome.
Yeah.
How has your in-person blog strategy workshops been since COVID? Because obviously you can't meet in person. Did you have to move them online?
Actually, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because around January 2020, and it's funny because I think everybody had the same hopes for 2020, the start of not only the start of a new year, but the start of a new decade.
Yeah.
But it's crazy because I haven't really told many people this, but I think I've mentioned it maybe on an interview or two, but I had this really interesting dream about fire, and I looked it up, and the type of dream I had to do with transformation and change, because the previous year I felt I was kind of stuck, but at the same time all over the place as well. I felt as if I had hit a wall with the workshops and consulting, and just didn't feel that motivated anymore. Whereas with my social venture that I had co-founded, I had been toying with the idea of maybe taking it more seriously, really going forward and treating it as a business. So come end of January, I made the decision to actually, it's weird. It's almost as if Making the Bacon kind of went in a circle. It started off as a blog and then went to like consulting and workshops, but now I kind of want to just keep it as this blog where I share my thoughts, I share podcast notes and interviews with entrepreneurs. So in a sense that it didn't really change, but I guess the interesting thing is maybe I would have been a lot more busier because people would be like, how do I start a blog? I need to get online, but I try not to let myself think about that too much and agree with my gut that I made the right decision to go forward with a social venture. Because with respect to that, we had been doing a lot of in-person events the previous year. So we had actually planned out the next 6 months of 2020. So, okay, we're going to do all these events. We're going to have workshops and stuff. And of course, COVID hit. But fortunately, we were able to pivot to virtual workshops. But we had been already thinking in the back of our minds that we wanted to offer virtual workshops on top of in-person events to reach the people that who weren't physically able to go to our events or for whatever reason. So I think it kind of worked out that way, being able to do virtual events with our social venture.
Yeah. And so speaking of events, what inspired Cabigon Connection?
Okay, so that's another interesting thing. It's one of those things. So I like to think of myself as an ideas person. I'll go to people or people who I think will be able to help me and tell them those 4 magic words. No, 5. Yeah, 5. Hey, I have an idea. So going to my co-founder friend, Rigel, and it was interesting because prior to this, we were actually working on our own business. She had a business automation systems business that she was using to help like clients create systems for their online business. And I was focusing on Making the Bacon consulting, but I just, again, going back to that person who wants to try all these different things, I said to myself, hey, you're a Filipino entrepreneur. I'm a Filipino Canadian entrepreneur. Where are the other Filipino Canadian entrepreneurs? And we thought, well, with respect to where we are in the greater Toronto area, there's a large population of Filipinos. And I thought, okay, let's try and bring them together. So we started to just ask people, even people we didn't know, but we thought like, hey, we're planning an event, let's try it out. And it was really interesting because I didn't really have any intention at the time to move forward with it. It's like, hey, let's see if we can get some people. We'll be lucky if we even get 5 people, but thankfully we were able to get about 30 people. And it was interesting because people mentioned to us either in person after the event or via instant messaging saying, hey, that was a really great event. Thank you so much for letting me share my story, or I've never been to an event like this. But the key thing was the question they asked afterwards was, when's your next event? Yeah. Oh, I'm not an event planner. I have no intention to do this. But then kind of realizing how we were able to start this community and that there was a need for it. So we started to do more events, and then more new people came. And then again, same question, kept on asking, when's your next event? When's your next event? And I thought, okay, I think this is something that we can actually build upon. So in addition to those virtual workshops, we're kind of hoping to offer more for the community, such as things that organizations already offer. So it's not as if we create a new technology, just basically taking an idea that existed, that already exists, and catering it to our particular demographics. So we hope to have memberships and online courses, mastermind groups, again, just kind of providing those resources and also highlighting people of the Filipino Canadian entrepreneur community, and also actually beyond. I forgot to add too that with our virtual workshops, again, for people who physically couldn't attend, we've had people from BC, British Columbia, so other parts of Canada, the Yukon, California, and then also even as going as far as to the other side of the world. So we did actually have someone from the Philippines attend one of our workshops, which I thought was really cool. Yeah.
And I think that's also the power of the internet too. There's a lot of change going on with that. There's a platform called tribe.so that allows you to make your own like social network. And I think that'd be perfect for you. That's crazy how just like someone across the world is able to find you and be able to join you like that.
Yeah.
Kind of going off a little bit different tangent here, a biochemistry degree. And so that's interesting choice.
So
Of
don't
course,
ask me any questions though. Like, I
don't
feel
ask
like I forgot that stuff.
well, now I have to. No, of course, there's many reasons. There's reasons why you got it kind of mentioned earlier and whatnot. And what seems to like be most interesting to ask is that what do you think you could do to incorporate it in some shape or form in your future, like in your content creation cycle?
You know what the funny thing is? I thought, and I would always tell people, I'm not using my degree. It's a piece of fancy artwork that hangs in my parents' living room. But someone had pointed out to me, even though I'm not working in a lab, I'm using a lot of skills that come with a scientific mind. So
Mhm.
the researching, like the gathering of data, the analyzing the data and making decisions from data. So in a sense, I guess I am kind of using those particular skills. Oh yes, and writing in a notebook. So I remember for the lab classes, have to write a notebook, write down all the measurements and times. You put things into the what do you call it, centrifuge and stuff like that.
Yeah, interesting. And yeah, I figured like in some shape or form, it's still kept with you and whatnot. So we're both zigzag life pursuers, and that definitely is exhilarating. However, I do believe that most of that success and that ideal has come from our self-education that we were talking about earlier. How have you approached your self-learning?
I've been trying to approach my self-learning by something simple as not having my cell phone
Hmm.
with me because I find it to be very distracting. And I had heard on an interview when they were someone who was taking online courses that they put headphones on, and I think that helps with the trying to focus. So other things with respect to self-learning, again, I want to learn a lot of things. Like I would love to learn how to play the ukulele, but when I think about it, that probably won't help me with my other career goals.
Well, you'd be surprised. A lot of the most successful people in the world always played an instrument because the way that playing a music changes your brain actually helps with your IQ and just overall connections in the brain. So you might be surprised.
Yeah, actually, just to add on to that, I did play an instrument for a while. I took about 6 years of piano and a year of violin, but to think to go back to relearning it, I'm not sure if I would have the discipline. I think I might be very frustrated, and I don't really have a lot of room in the house to like have a piano.
Yeah.
I guess maybe a keyboard.
Well, I just want to interject real quick because it's fascinating how this comes up because there's a lot of similarities between you and I and a lot of people who come on the show. Like this multi-potentialite nature of wanting to do many different things. There's also this kind of pickiness in a way that we have. And I was talking with someone who was a guest on my show just this past weekend. We're just having a call and both of us want to learn to play guitar. I literally have a guitar in my closet. It's a starter guitar to learn how to do it. I've never tried very more than like 5 minutes one day. And it's interesting how like it's not necessarily a matter of discipline because we have the discipline to learn. You and I both can learn something really quickly if we want to. But it's just if we don't want to, there's just no point to doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. There's definitely a big difference between wanting to learn versus like actually doing it. And it's almost as if like the world is your oyster. There's so many different things that you want to learn, but again, there's so many hours in the day. And I think, yes, we're really good, being a multi-potentialite enables you to learn different things, but I think even then we have our limits.
Yeah.
I want to learn several different things, but I can't learn 50 different things at the same time.
One thing I've been noticing a lot is this idea of macro and micro focus. So having an idea of where you want to go in the big picture, so to speak, but like what are you focusing on the day to day? You mentioned earlier how you want to sit down a certain time of hours a day, like a deep work. That's what it made me think of as Deep Work by Cal Newport. And that's kind of like your micro focus. Like what are you focusing on now to get it done? And I feel like for people like us, we have to understand that well. We have to have the self-awareness of what are we doing now? What are we going to go next? Like you don't have to have a super strong structure. I'm going to do this, then this, then this, but have an idea of like, hey, this is what I want to do next. Let's work that into the system, so to speak. It seemed that you didn't like the path that you chose when going to college, which is why you were mentioning earlier, don't ask me any questions about it. And so you decided to change it like halfway through, it seems like, what I recall. How can we step outside our comfort zone for ways to change our paths if we're not satisfied with them?
I think if you want to change something, you have no choice but to step out of your comfort zone, because think about what you've been doing for the past 5-10 years and it's not working. Then if something's not working, really, I mean, this is really simple advice. You have to change it. It's almost as if, especially again, going back to this day and age, we have to learn to become comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Mm. As a fitness instructor, swim instructor particularly, a lot of the issue comes down to breathing. When you're doing fitness on the ground and like a fitness class with personal training, something like that, you can breathe as much as you want. Sure, breathing has an important point. If you breathe with your reps, it can be much more effective, but you can breathe at any point. If you feel like you're dying or something like that, you can do it. Under the water, there's a big concept behind not being able to breathe. You're like, crap, I need to breathe now. And you start panicking more than if you were out of breath running on the track. And so I find it fascinating how when people are trying to learn to swim, it's not the fact that we need oxygen. Most of the time, it's the CO2 in our system getting like just sitting there kind of making us tense, getting in their brain, getting in the muscles. So most of the time it's not breathing in, it's actually breathing out, which you can do underwater. So when people have that realization, there's a big change there. And it's a matter of feeling uncomfortable because they're like, I'm uncomfortable because I think I need to breathe. No, it's uncomfortable that you need to breathe out. And then once you're empty, you can actually hold it for longer and feel better. But it is still feeling uncomfortable and being okay with that and continuing on anyways.
Mm-hmm.
You have like written and audio formats with your content. And one thing I was looking for is like, where's the video? So like, do you see yourself making any videos at all, or even just repurposing your audios into video?
Yeah, that's a question I get asked a lot. And of course, as I see with Polycast and podcasts, people doing video, and I don't know, maybe it's just my stubbornness, but I really like the convenience of audio. I understand that YouTube is a wonderful search engine and it's a great way to repurpose your podcast, but I think it might have to do with the way I consume podcasts and Polycast is that I listen when I'm doing something else. So when I'm cooking, cleaning, baking, the odd time going for a walk. I don't really go for that many walks because I hate walking, but
Fitness instructor hating walking?
Yeah, I know. You know what's really funny? Again, I'm kind of going on a tangent off of that is that I can be really lazy. Like I don't like walking. I find it too slow. I don't like running, but I have tried running so many times. So I'm this person like, okay, I'm not going to knock it until I've tried it a few times. So running, I hate. I've tried a few times. Hot yoga, I've tried several times. I hate it. But what I've actually have taken up is cycling. So I've been really enjoying that. And my husband and I, we've been doing a lot of routes around the area. So sorry, I'm Canadian. I don't know what this translates into miles, but we've been doing about 40-kilometer rides. So a lot of uphill as well. So I've been really enjoying that. So, okay, I'm getting,
your quads are probably burning.
Oh yeah, trust me. Oh my gosh. Like I am cursing almost more than half the time, but yeah, so I'm like, I will choose that over running. So yeah, I guess I can't do a triathlon because I feel like I hate this.
No.
Sorry, what was the question again? Oh my gosh,
something about YouTube videos.
Oh yes, that's right. Like video, going back to repurposing the content and video, and I don't know. I'll be honest. Just for me, I prefer audio, and I think some people also prefer it too. I mean, like I have no qualms about preparing myself, getting into the mindset for a video, but I think sometimes some people like the convenience of, oh, I don't have to have my video on. I can be in my pajamas or sweatpants, or like, oh, I'm feeling or I'm looking really sick or hungover, but I still want to do the podcast. So I think I'm going to just stick with audio.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And in the past, I might actually be the kind of person to try to convince you to do YouTube as well, mainly because Gary Vee is always getting me in my brain. There was a lot of points too where I'm thinking like, well, you know what you want and you're pursuing that. That's what matters more than anything. Screw the medium. If you don't want to do video, then don't do video. Also, I just want to make a note to anyone who's listening who's going to be on the show. I don't care if you wear pajamas. Wear your pajamas. Do it. So the other day, my internet went out. I don't know what was going on with my company, but like it literally just kept cutting out, and like it would just cut out for like a day or so. It was really bad. And I was in the middle of recording with someone who was really cool, Anissa Butt. She was we were middle talking, and then all of a sudden we just got cut off. And I was like, okay, like we're gonna have to like reschedule. Like I'm sorry. And we did another day. Obviously we had different clothes on, so like I made a joke about wardrobe change, which was kind of funny. But for the most part, like I don't care like the appearance of it. It's gonna be a great video because we had great conversation. But appearances are great. I do the video so that we can see your expression. When you laugh, it's much better to see the smile on your face rather than just hear it. So that's because people like to see that. But if someone wants to listen to it, do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Options. That's like, it's all about options for me.
So just wanted to add in with respect to you talking about how your internet was cutting out. I haven't used these tools because I don't really do video, but people have suggested using, maybe you've heard of them for podcasting or polycasting, Squadcast and Zencaster. So I don't know if that...
Neither one of them have recording video just yet. Zencaster has the beta, and I'm on the wait list. I was like one of the first people on the waiting list. I'm still like 11,000 on the list. So that sucks. And Squadcast is still hasn't even released their beta. There's actually another one that you should know of. It's Riverside.fm. And I think with audio too, it's even cheaper. I haven't done it because it's expensive for the video, but it's native video and audio on both sides, which is the only tool that does that. All the other tools have some native audio, but not necessarily native video. Maybe Zencaster eventually will, but like, yeah, it's interesting.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to check it out. It's like thinking of all the people who are watching this and like, I hope you have a notebook. I hope you're taking lots of notes.
Well, and what I really love is that like when people like you and I are having just a great conversation, at the end of it, we don't stop. And so like we'll stop recording, but we'll just start sharing links like, hey, have you heard of this?
Yeah.
I was on a show, Time for Your Hobby. I was just sharing a hobby that I did. And we literally spent an hour afterwards just sharing links. That was it. Like, hey, do you want to know about this? That's funny. So speaking of like knowing where we want to do and where we want to go, how can we take that one step forward in the direction that we want our life to be in?
Okay, again, this is giving really simple advice, is taking action. I just say, I think a lot of people, again, are just hung up on the whole starting, the whole trying. I'm not ready yet. I don't know anything yet. But again, thinking about like, nobody knows everything when they start, right? It's just, it's when you get on that path, then you become more excited and intrigued. Like, I want to know more about this. I want to know more about this. And obviously the more you know, the more action you take, you're progressing even further.
Yeah. At the very beginning, we were talking about how it took us forever to start doing our podcasts or polycasts. Like I started doing solo casts first. I had 42 episodes of my solo cast before I even started doing any interviews. And it took me forever to get started with that because I couldn't get used to my hearing of my voice. Because the reason why, just for people listening, is that the bone conduction in our jaws make our voice sound deeper to ourselves because we can hear the vibrations. But when we hear it on the microphone, we don't have that conduction, so it sounds lighter.
Yeah, I always think to myself, every time I don't like listening to the episode, not because, it's not great content, because of my voice. And I always think that after you had mentioned, the reason why, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Because I feel when I listen to myself on recordings, I think I sound like a kid.
Yeah. Well, and on top of that too, just seeing ourselves on camera just feels weird. And I've gotten used to looking at the camera, even if I'm blinded by my ring light that's attached to my camera here. But like, I'm used to looking at it because I want to have that presentation experience there. And it's one of the things I learned over time. I didn't do YouTube for a whole year after starting my polycast because I just didn't feel ready for it, even though I knew I was. So the point I wanted to make is that you have to take that first step forward, like you're saying. And if you don't start making it, and you were mentioning earlier, very important concept, quality over quantity. But there is some people who say that you get quality by doing quantity. Once you get your first 100 polycasts or podcasts out, your first 100 videos or first 100 blog posts, you're going to be a hell of a lot better then. Something I empathize with you about is the prospect of wearing all the hats and as a solopreneur. And how have you found your path in that? How have you found your solace in a way?
Well, it's one of those things, I guess. There's obviously going to be things that you enjoy doing more, but I think being a solopreneur, wearing all these hats, it helps you understand all your aspects of the business for when it gets to the point where you can outsource or hire a team. You can create a system, or you can understand what they're doing or understand what they're talking about when you're trying to talk about strategy. So I'm the type of person, again, I think going back to the whole multi-potentialite polymath criteria, again, I like to know what's going on. I like to learn all these different things so I can see how the business is running as a whole.
Well, and going back to what you said earlier too, you've gone past the perfectionist stage, which I'm still in, so I can learn a lot from you there. It's interesting because if you could build a workflow and then be able to show it to someone else, they can follow it and do the work for you, then you can delegate. I actually hired someone to edit a couple of my videos for the Polycast, and it was interesting because it was a really phenomenal editor, but I didn't feel comfortable enough delegating that. I'm a perfectionist on it when it comes to editing. I don't like editing these videos. interviews, even the scheduling of the interviews, I enjoy doing. As I mentioned earlier, I did 90 tabs of those 90 pages. And it's one of those things where I enjoy those parts of the stages, but not the editing parts. But I don't want to give that part up. So knowing when you need to delegate and when you shouldn't, I think is really important too.
Yeah, for sure. Knowing, and I think having that mindset, knowing that if you delegate something, again, it'll free up your schedule to focus on other things that you want to work on.
Well, and another point to do is like, you need to know what you need to know. Like, you don't know what you don't know is another way to say it too, I guess. But if I wanted to have that editor do my videos and I don't know how to edit them, then I don't know what to tell him to do. Like, if there's something implied of that. Yeah. Where have you found then, like, the kind of pivot off of that, how have you not become a perfectionist, bro? How have you become a non-perfectionist then? Can't ask questions today, I swear.
So, okay, maybe if I try to repeat back what I think you're trying to
See, I can't ask questions today. I don't know what's going on. I am a little hungry. Maybe I'm just kind of getting loose in the brain.
How did I stop becoming a perfectionist?
Yes, that's the word.
I think it's maybe a few things might have to do. I'm also an impatient person as well, thinking if I spend more time on this trying to tweak it a little bit more, it'll never get done. But I think also reading more books or learning more about the startup community, again, like their culture, okay, just move fast, break things, just create this MVP and ship it out, reiterate. So I think, trying to adopt that mindset has helped me become less of a perfectionist.
A lean solopreneur instead of a lean startup.
Well, yeah, I guess so. But then I feel like with also the working on the social venture kind of gives me a little taste of being a lean startup, because a lot of times I think, well, what about this? What about this? And then I think to myself, you know what, just do it. And this is another common thing I feel in the podcast interviews I do is like Nike, just do it.
Yeah, exactly. I tell my personal training client that all the time, because he just gives me so much attitude about things. I'm thinking of one person in particular, and I'm just like, just do it. I don't care if you fail, just do it anyways. Yeah, that's crazy. And so considering the global phenomenon we're having right now, and there's a lot of talk about on this show, actually, in particular, about adaptation. So where do you think is a key principle of adapting to change? What is a key principle of adapting?
What is the key principle?
Mm-hmm.
I think it ties into a lot of the themes that we've been talking about in this interview already, is being being comfortable with being uncomfortable. Yeah, I said comfortable then uncomfortable. The self-education part, being able to apply your learning. I think those are three things that kind of have to do with the whole being able to adapt to change. It's
interesting too, because there seems to be this cohesive theme throughout the entire episode, which is perfect. I think that you as being a podcast host is very helpful as being a guest, because it just helps. You were able to relay it back to the whole polymath theme too. So good job on you on that. Yeah. And so it's interesting too. Yeah. Cause like being able to be uncomfortable is really important. One last question I have for you here, and I don't know if you know the term or not, but what is your ikigai?
Okay, that I'll be honest, I do not know. So I'm very interested in learning, so I can add this to my new thing I've learned today.
Yeah, and you can add it to your vocabulary.
Yes, there you go. I'll end up saying that after every question. Ikigai.
Ikigai. So it is the reason for being. It's a Japanese concept for what you do in life. Essentially, it's a Venn diagram of what you're good at, what you can be paid for, what the world needs, and what do you enjoy doing. And when you can find an intersection of all four of those, that is the ikigai.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I guess in a sense, the fact that you mentioned Venn diagram, I am familiar with that. I think I'm kind of experiencing it now, or I'm on my way with the social venture with respect to building that community, realizing I'm good at creating opportunities for these people. And so far, we've been able to generate a little bit of revenue in creating those opportunities for people.
I resonate with the idea of social entrepreneurship. So I think your social ventures is probably the same kind of idea, where you're trying to make change out there, hashtag make a change, and someone, and for someone like you who's able to create so many ideas, it probably is a perfect combination there. I love that. And so where can people find you online?
Well, as you know, you said my SEO is on point, so you can pretty much find me everywhere, and now on IMDb. So where people can find me is pretty much everywhere. I am everyone, if you're not sure how to spell my name, I'll keep things simple. So my blog is Makin the Bacon. So makinthebacon.com. If you want to find me on social media, I have been able to keep my handle the same across the board. So
Nice.
Makin the Bacon with the number 1 at the end, because I always tell everybody not to sound like Dr. Seuss, but Makin the Bacon was already taken. So I had wanted Makin the Bacon, but unfortunately the person on Twitter had the egg, the default photo of the egg, and never got back to me. So you know what? We'll just put number 1 and keep things consistent. So my podcast, it's Bacon, Bits, and Bytes. So the word bacon, the letter N, Bytes, BYTES. However, on Twitter, it's baconbits_bytes.
Well, sometimes you have to do that.
As long as it's relatively close, I think it's okay.
Yeah, there's some brands who actually take out a letter or something like that. Thank you for coming on. Once again, this is Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator, and Karen Swyszcz. I didn't remember the Ukrainian version super well. Sorry about that, but on the Polymath Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a really awesome time.
Me too.